Taxi!
Where to, mate?
Hello, mate. 55 Tufton Street, please.
55 Tufton Street, SW1. Yep, I know it well. Hop in, sir. This is A Nation of Taxpayers, a weekly podcast from the Taxpayers Alliance.
It's another episode of A Nation of Taxpayers, the podcast from the Taxpayers Alliance. I'm your host, Duncan Barkes, and we're recording this on the 1st of April 2025. Now, I don't normally give away a date or tell you when we record it in too much detail, but it's relevant because you might think this podcast and the content of the Taxpayers Alliance Town Hall Rich List is some kind of an April Fool's Day joke when you get to hear about the vast sums of money that people in local councils aren't being paid. But it's not a joke. The Rich List is out today, and we're going to talk about it this week on A Nation of Taxpayers. Joining me from the TPA is Jonathan Eida. Hello, Jonathan.
Hello.
Making your debut on the podcast.
Yeah, indeed.
An absolute pleasure to have you in the studio. And Councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman joins us as well. I just want to go through a little bit of your legend almost, Matthew, if I may. Director of Get Elected, your consultancy, Conservative Councillor for the London Borough of Harrow, that's the Hatch End Ward, and also you were a very successful campaign manager for the Conservative MP for Harrow East, Bob Blackman.
Yes, I was.
Have I missed anything else?
Well, I've also got a book coming out as well, if you want to plug that too, on the 4th of July.
I will happily plug that, because that is here on my list of stuff to mention. So let's just do that. The book is called The Blueprint.
Yes, absolutely.
What's it about?
So it's basically about that general election campaign in Harrow East, where the polls gave us a 1% chance of winning, and we came out nearly doubling the majority and making him the safest Conservative MP in the country. So it's a bit of a day-by-day guide telling you all the secrets and some nibbles like that. So yes, absolutely, it'll be really exciting.
Two things and a cheeky request. Can I have a freebie copy?
Of course you can, as long as I can come back on.
You can, that's a deal. We'll shake on that. But also, I think we have had various Conservative MPs on this podcast in the past, and a lot of them listen as well. So they should probably hire your services.
They should do. They can come to getelected.uk to hire my consultancy services, and they can order a book on my website, matthewgoodwinfreeman.uk. There you go. That's all the plugs done within the first 30 seconds.
Well done. Let's crack on. Let's talk about waste in the sector, the public sector, which is a theme that often reoccurs on this podcast, but something that the TPA has been doing for, I think it's 19 years now, Jonathan, isn't it? This is the 19th edition of the Town Hall Rich List from the Taxpayers Alliance. I'll let you take the lead and just go through some of the highlights, and then Matthew and I can take it in turns to be exasperated. What have you got?
Sure. So firstly, we need to say a big thank you to the whole team for getting this out. Getting this out is a massive slog every year. It's our biggest release. We're looking at over 380 councils, 4,000 odd rows of data, which is a lot, and it really takes a thorough check. It has to go through, if you don't know, the way the TPA is set up, we have a research team, a campaigns team, and then a fundraising and operations team. The research team spent months collating the data. The campaigns team had to work very hard to get it out into the newspaper so everyone can see it. And then we're not even done with Town Hall Rich List yet, because we're going on a roadshow at some point. We do that every year. We go visit different parts of the country where to highlight essentially the amount that town hall bosses are receiving. So it's really a team effort. So what is the point of Town Hall Rich List? So the main point of it is transparency. When you have the power devolved into local authorities, that comes with its benefits and comes with its downsides. The upsides are that you get to have services at a local level that are tailor-made to the needs of the local communities. But what happens is it becomes harder to hold each and every aspect of government to account, including the local government. So it can get quite shady, not necessarily for nefarious reasons. Mm-hmm. However, it just goes under the radar what happens in local authorities. So we are trying to shed light on it, showing where the money goes, where does your council tax go, and what we highlight every year is how much is going on the bosses of these councils. This year we found almost 4,000 council employees received over £100,000 or more, which was an 800 increase on the previous year. Yeah. That is partially down to more councils releasing accounts. There was a delay during COVID, which prevented councils from getting their accounts audited, whereas this year it seems like a lot have caught up. There are 15 who did not produce any accounts, including bankrupt Birmingham, which is it's in the news at the moment
Massively.
for their waste that's literally lining the streets.
Yeah, bin liners overflowing, rats the size of cats.
17,000 tonnes, I read
It's
yesterday.
nuts, isn't it?
It's crazy.
So we don't have the figures for Birmingham?
No, the last time they produced a councillor, they did have six, at least in their senior remuneration table, that received above the £100,000 threshold.
Yeah.
But that was 2 years ago. Their chief exec at the time was over 200,000.
Amazing.
In total remuneration.
Right.
And residents aren't seeing results.
All right, let me ask you a question, because I think a few people listening to our podcast will be interested in the practical side of pulling together something like the Town Hall Rich List. When do you start work on this?
So this is literally months in the making, because we need to firstly go through every single council, see if they've produced accounts. Then we do a first look through of the accounts. The way councils will set up their accounts is they'll have a senior remuneration table, which we look through to do for their senior employees, but then they'll do remuneration tables, which just have salary bands, basically, so that all needs to be calculated. Then councils will produce accounts as we go along, so we're constantly looking through the councils that had not produced accounts to ensure that they produce accounts, and we get them in before our deadline of when we produce the paper.
Right, and I mean, there's been some really good media coverage so far today, and there'll be a load more. I've seen stuff in various national newspapers and online as well, and broadcast work, and it's great that the TPA is highlighting this. For me, I'm actually, I was going to say fascinated, that's not the right word. I'm incredulous when I hear that there are vast amounts of people working for councils in this country who earn more money than the Prime Minister. I just can't get my head around that.
Well, I mean, growing up, you sort of thought that the Prime Minister was the top job in the country, and that's the where all the money needs to go to. But instead, it's someone in the local council who's head of marketing or something like that is the person who's on the top salaries.
How did we end up in that situation? Because you're absolutely right. You talk about scale. I mean, anyone, if you asked a 5-year-old and you said, who do you think would earn more money? The person theoretically running the country, or the person who's running, I don't know, Hertfordshire County Council? A 5-year-old would go, well, surely it's the person who's running the country. I mean, how did this happen?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think maybe Matthew would be even better placed than me to answer this. Like, how are the amounts determined for the remuneration?
So what's it like? You've got skin in this game.
Yeah,
Matthew.
so I'm a local councillor, and so I newly elected back in 2022. So I think I can still say newly elected for a few more months. It's crazy. It's the civil service that no one elected, no one knows of, but have always been there. Are the ones behind the scenes in the council. And what I often find is there's a misunderstanding between what councillors do and what those officers do, and that's a big issue, because everyone thinks that we as the councillors are the ones walking around on these wonderful massive salaries. I mean, I'd love it, but I'm not.
And let me just interrupt you for a second, because you get an allowance, don't you? You get allowances, but you don't get a salary.
Absolutely.
So people are clear.
So councillors get an allowance. I think it's about the same as what the minimum wage is now in the UK. So it's not something to go cheering about. And also, frankly, from my point of view, my allowance goes straight into a savings account that then is spent on leaflets and stuff, communicating what I'm doing in the local area to residents. We aren't getting the big bucks like these officers are. But the frustration from a council point of view as councillors is you're the ones accountable. It's your names that are on the ballot paper. You're the ones who have to get re-elected in 4 years' time. And also, you're the one where residents think it is all down to you. So when you're dealing with officers that have maybe been around for years and years, had it easy, seen administrations come and go, they are the ones that actually are sort of trying to nudge out the door, and then you get into the details of their contracts, and gosh.
Well, we should talk about that in a second, because I have some insight on that. So, I mean, given your experience so far at Harrow, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position, and certainly you shouldn't name names, but would you go so far as to say that there's you're a councillor, you want to do the right thing for your ward or your local area, and let's say, for example, there's some local issue and you raise it, and then you hit this massive obstacle of an officer or 6 going kind of like, can't do that, or you need to understand this. I mean, is it a massive problem?
My first year as a councillor was learning the way to get stuff done.
Right.
And not often is that actually going through, finding the relevant officer. I mean, also trying to find out who it is.
Right.
Councils are humongous organisations. I mean, just to put it into perspective, Harrow, when we started off as an administration in 2022, around £600 million a year that council deals with. And that's not uncommon. Other councils deal with far, far more a year. That's the scale of councils. They are small, giant corporations effectively running hundreds and hundreds of local services. Everyone can name the bin collections.
Yeah.
Everyone can name potholes. Some people then name parks and fly tipping. But there's over 600 different jobs that a council does. And the vast majority of the money goes on adult social care and children with special education needs. Yeah. That's the difficulty. Those are statutory jobs that we have to provide as a council, and the cost of them isn't covered by the government, isn't covered by the NHS. It is the council that has to fund it, working with the private sector. And that's the frustration, because so much of the money goes in and then straight back out on
can we
a
have
very
an honest
small number of
conversation?
people.
Because you're right with what you say there. I mean, I hear stories that you have children who are getting taxis to go to and from schools, but not necessarily in their local area. It might be well out of the area.
Yeah,
and that council has to pick up the tab. Now, I want any child in society to have the best possible start in life. Though equally, what's your view? Does every kid who's getting one of those cabs actually need it?
Well, the problem is access to special education needs places.
Right.
So in Harrow, we have managed to, in the previous government, we managed to get a funding to build a new special needs school. Unfortunately, this government's now put that on ice, and we're trying to find a way around it, because that would provide hundreds of places for local residents in Harrow with special education needs children to have a school place in Harrow.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're completely right. It's getting the buses and the taxis miles and miles and miles away to the next available special needs school that will take that kid. And remember, these are people who their entire life is going to be a difficulty.
Yes.
It's going to be facing these obstacles. And again, it's something the council has to do. We don't have a choice to do it. We have to do it. So the problem is places. It's school places. And so that's why, we're fortunate in Harrow that we may well have this school on the horizon, and then that helps us with costs. Obviously, the taxis down the road are far cheaper than the taxis around the M25. But that's not the same for every council. And there'll be hundreds of councils around the country going, if only we could build a special needs school in our area.
It's really interesting. Jonathan, let's go back to your massive amount of stats here and numbers. I was going to use the term name and shame, and then I'm slightly hesitant as to whether or not we should be using the word shame. And now I'm thinking, what the hell? Because we should name and shame people who are on vast amounts of money, because ultimately we pay their salaries. What have you got on your list? Who's getting what? And how big are the numbers?
Yeah, can I just preface that with actually a remark following on from what we just said? One of the biggest criticisms that we get from Town Hall Rich List every year is the fact that councils do have such a large budget to deal with and to control. So people will say, well, a massive corporation, the CEOs of those will get paid a lot. So naturally, these are huge organisations, and therefore they should deserve similar amounts. However, the fact is that it comes from taxpayers' money, which is a limited resource. It's taking out the economy, not adding to the economy, and that needs to be respected, essentially. And then you see...
Well, can I just add to that, though? That, because I hear that argument time and time again. It's like, well, vast budgets, etc., private sector responsibility. In the private sector, if you weren't performing well, your shareholders or your management team or someone would go, hang on a second, you're not doing very well. Either you take a pay cut or we find someone else to do the job. That's not the same mechanism, is it, for vast amounts of these officers or chief executives?
Yeah, and that's the point of our Town Hall Rich List, is to shine a light on that. Let residents decide, are they getting the services for the amount received by these bosses, but essentially.
Transparency.
Before you go into your list, because I know I asked you a specific question about some of the big numbers, what were you going to say now?
So I was just going to say, I think that's the problem. So many people don't know enough about their local councils. It's not performance driven. And that's what it's good that we're trying to expose and bring light to, making it performance driven, putting power back into the consumer, which is all of us as taxpayers.
No, 100%.
Right, what have you got there?
Yeah, so the number one council boss that received the most amount, essentially, was a woman called Anne-Marie O'Donnell, who's the chief executive of Glasgow Council, who received £567,000 in total remuneration, which includes an over £200,000 salary and a pension contribution of basically 350,000. Pounds. Now that was due to a pension strain, which is a technical thing, which essentially she got paid her pension earlier than expected for a redundancy. Now you would assume that when one leaves a council for a redundancy, a retirement. You assume that they are finished. Anne-Marie O'Donnell has now joined a PR firm, so she is still working.
Of course she has.
But received the pension from. Throughout.
But even if you take the pension element of that away, her base salary is still more than the Prime Minister of this country, right?
Yeah, it's true. There happens to be that Glasgow Council is a very big council. They have a lot of subsidiary companies that we
It's not as big as the United Kingdom.
No, that's true. It's not as big as the United Kingdom. And yeah.
All right, what else you got there?
That's crazy.
What else have we got there? So some of the councils that went bust. I mentioned Birmingham earlier. Nottingham and Woking also went bust and declared bankruptcy in 2023-24. They had 8 officials receiving over £100,000 that we found in the.
You see, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I know we're banging the same drum here, but if your council goes, for want of a better term, belly up, you can quite easily make the argument, Matthew, that the officers have they're responsible. They failed, right? I know it's a harsh word, but they failed. I mean, presumably they're still in their jobs. Do we know if they're still?
That would be interesting to know how many of them are still in the jobs or are on the ways out. Because I agree with you. There needs to be some accountability. In Harrow, I can only obviously speak from my own experiences. In Harrow, as far as I'm aware, we do not have a single person in that senior level of management that is there from before we took over. We have made redundancies, we have restructured, we have moved people on and promoted within, which is the most important thing, because we all can point out to officers that really do well, who do a fantastic job, who are always responding to emails. They're the brilliant ones. They are the ones who then, when an availability comes for a job higher up, you should be going up, not someone who's been around forever, and you get those complaints about them. But I mean, I'm sorry, those salaries are ridiculous. That's absolutely crazy.
The TPA's position, in fact, is that if you are deserving of the job, you deserve remuneration befitting that.
Exactly.
The issue is that when you have so many officials on that amount, and then you see a record of failure, that's really surprising and shocking. And I'd like to point out a couple of titles that
excellent! We love a title.
We love a title, don't we?
Yeah.
That highlight some of the potential waste here. I saw Buckingham and Dagenham had a strategic director of inclusive growth. Now I don't know what inclusive growth is.
I did this on another show a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about going through making efficiencies in the government. I could honestly go through a list of names of just gone, sacked tomorrow. There's millions of pounds saved.
Let's just for a moment try and be balanced, just for the sake of entertainment. What's that title again?
So that was the Strategic Director of Inclusive Growth.
Inclusive growth.
What does that mean? What is inclusive growth?
Yeah, that's a good question.
All right.
Lambeth Council had a Corporate Director of Climate and Inclusive Growth. My personal favourite was Merton, which had an Executive Director of Environment, Civic Pride and Climate on over £160,000.
There's a reoccurring theme here. What else? Have you got any others?
I actually do have one for Harrow. Director of Inclusive Economy and Culture.
I'm trying to think who that is. I won't name any names.
Inclusive Economy and Culture.
Are they still in position?
They were when the accounts were released.
See, that's really interesting. I'm fed up of being balanced now. Because you just kind of go, is that because there is this climate that's been allowed to fester actually under the last Conservative government for 14 years? I'm sorry, Matthew. It's like, inclusiveness, we must have this. I mean, why is that relevant to this?
May well be. I mean, one of my frustrations with council structures is, and one of the things that I saw the Taxpayers Alliance is calling for, is allowing greater flexibility when it comes to the funding and when it comes to budgets. I think that is really vital, because so much of what councils get is either incredibly ring-fenced, ridiculously ring-fenced, or it is, you can spend it for this within this time frame, or else you're going to lose it, and actually you'll lose it with interest. And I think what we need to move to a system of is councils have far more flexibility when it comes to what they can spend their money on, but also far more flexibility when it comes to the funding. Because an example I can give is in Harrow, we've just recently got the settlement, and our settlement this year was around 3%. The outer London average was 12%. And that's the frustration, because we know that this government's wanting to turn into like multi-year settlements. Well, that's going to be a multi-year bad deal for Harrow, and means our money is only going to have to go one way when we're trying to think of ways to bring in income to the council to then spend. But one of the biggest things that the councils have to do is efficiency drives, major efficiency drives, to sort out jobs that don't need to be there and restructure so that it's just a clear chain of command.
100%.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the mantra of the TPA, isn't it? It's in the TPA's DNA, and quite rightly so. I mean, it's just this use of the word inclusiveness or inclusive. You kind of just you'd think, well, actually, that should be your default setting. You're there. You want everyone in your area to feel involved or to benefit from this. Have you got anything for West Sussex County Council? I should just declare I live in Chichester in the wilds of West Sussex, and that's where West Sussex County Council are based. So where's my council tax going, Jonathan?
Well, there's 26 members on our rich list that were from West Sussex.
Brilliant.
The chief exec is partially shared with, I believe, Brighton Council, and so some of the money will be recouped for her total remuneration for that. Duncan, how's your council performing? That's
a very good question. It's well, you know what I'm going to say. It's one word, begins with P. Potholes.
Yeah.
There you are. Yeah. We have people on the roads of Chichester that started graffitiing the potholes. And they're like, they spray paint. They just go, I pay my tax for this. And it's like a big circle that's been spray painted around the potholes. I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but that's the stuff that matters to people.
This is what I say about people being local councillors. You deal with what is very visual. When people wake up and open their eyes, all of that falls under your remit. But the frustration is everywhere is bad. Everything has been allowed to get into a state of decline. Councils spending far more on certain things than they are on others, and budgets being constrained, that it becomes, well, hold on, if 60% of the roads, for example, need resurfacing, we can't just do that all at once. That would bankrupt the council straight away. So it then becomes, right, well, how much are you getting for the quote to resurface the road? And then also, which ones do you do first? Because everyone thinks, oh, well, my road needs to be done first. It's obviously the worst road. And actually, that's where you take a bit of a broader perspective.
100%. Another one that another project that we did through, I think, the past year was looking at how many bins each council has in terms of how many waste streams, essentially. And because that's something that really affects people. We found Blaenau Gwent in Wales had 10 waste streams, and funny enough, they also didn't produce accounts this year. But
interesting.
But yeah, so these are the issues that people care about, because it affects them day to day. No one likes rubbish
there's
piling
some really
up.
good stuff here. Anything else you want to highlight? Because I've got a few questions for Matthew and his role as a councillor who's at the coalface. Anything else we need to bring to attention of our podcast listeners?
Councils are spending more on the council bosses, and we want that to be reflected in their services.
And it's timely, isn't it, this rich list, because this is the month where everyone's council tax is going up by the legal maximum amount, which is, 4.99%.
4.99,
but there are exceptions elsewhere in the country. Some councils whacking it up by 10%. And I think it's fair to say there'll be people listening to this, and people right across the country who think, I'm paying more, I'm not seeing any greater benefit. Let's talk about what it's like, because you said something really interesting earlier, Matthew, about almost like rewarding or recognising the officers in a council who are really good, who reply to emails, I think you said, and kind of you want them to go further up the tree, if you like, because clearly they're good at what they do. However, and I've seen this, there are what's the polite term? There's dead wood. There you are. Some might describe it as dead wood within a local council. These people who have been there for years and years and years. They keep going up the pay bands because it's an automatic upgrade every year. You don't necessarily get rewarded for outstanding performance. It's like, oh, you've been here another year. Have a couple more grand, etc., etc. Is it particularly hard to get rid of those kind of people?
Well, the word I want to say starts with a C. It's called contract.
Right.
That's the problem. What word were you thinking of?
It's my mind's a sewer.
Contracts. That's the problem. It's once you get into the details of some of these people's contracts, you think, how on earth was this signed off years and years and years ago? That is the problem. And it is so difficult now for councils, especially new administrations, to do what is perceived the right thing. It's always on the side of the employer. We know it's going to get even worse with obviously this Employers' Rights Bill. That's the problem. I think that there needs to be a bit of a shift to give new administrations, particularly, a chance to look through these contracts and make substantial changes, and that it should be baked into the system, because that's the frustration. You could know that someone is the problem, they are the roadblock, they're the deadwood, as you said, they are the reason why we can't get stuff done. They're always a no, they're off on holiday or whatever it is, they're the problem. But because of their contract written donkeys years ago before you were even in administration, you can't get rid of them.
Yeah, and it's endemic across the public sector. So, you know, I did some public affairs work for the NHS for a period, for about a year, and I also worked for the BBC for 6 years, right? And there are parallels there. People who are not good at their job, who do not perform, in the private sector, ultimately, the HR phrase is you would manage them out,
Absolutely.
right? That's what you would do for the good of the business. In the public sector, they just get moved elsewhere. And the same with the BBC. I've seen BBC editors and managers who have been appalling at their job. And you'd go in the commercial sector, you would have been gone a long time ago. Instead, what they do is they move them into somewhere else, notably under the banner of special projects, which nobody really knows what that means. And I do think it's a public sector mindset.
Well, that's one of the frustrations. One of the great sayings is, it's, taxpayers' money is taxpayers' money. It's not anybody else's money.
Not council money.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not council money, it's taxpayers' money. When you're talking about restructuring and moving people around, I've always led with the mindset of run the council like a business. Yeah. At the end of the day, the numbers have to add up. Arguably, you need to be in surplus and in profit, and you need to be providing good quality services, if not excellent services. I think there needs to be a huge sense of transparency in local councils, of, whether it's RAG ratings or scorecards or whatever you want to do, any way that you can as a council communicate what you're doing to the residents is the best thing to do. Yeah. The frustration is so many of those councils, if they did it right now, would be deep in the red and in the amber.
And I think the systems need to change as well. Yep. What I hear from people who work for, have worked for councils, both at a district or borough level or a county council level, is that they have systems in place that have been there for years, yep, which in the modern age are no longer fit for purpose. But no one really has the will or the energy or the drive to go, why do we do it this way? It might be better.
Perfect example. In Harrow, when we took over, bin collections were being done still with pen and paper about had we ticked off the relevant roads and gone to the relevant systems. They had a digital system in place that was set up in the cabs, set up with the drivers and crews. They just weren't using it. That is one of the first changes that we made. We forced them, pen papers out of the cabs, use the digital systems. Bin collection rates now way up higher, missed bin collections are down, all those sorts of things. It's simple stuff like that is probably going on in dozens of councils around the country.
It doesn't surprise me. I was reading the other day about a train company that still has a fax machine.
I think I saw and used a fax machine once when I was a kid.
Well, you're a nipper compared to an old man like me. But yeah, there's a train company apparently still having to use fax machines for some kind of union reason.
It's always the unions.
It's a hard copy. We'll bring this particular episode to a close in a second. But Jonathan and Matthew, I suppose this leads us really on to what the desired outcome would be from a TPA perspective and actually from a councillor perspective when you look at some of these, I think it's fair to say, vast salaries that council employees are getting. Is it as simple as saying going forward we need to introduce a cap? Is it about performance-related pay? What do we think?
Ultimately, we want better services, so whatever outcome is the most efficient, better outcome, we want that. Whether that involves getting rid of people and clearing the deadwood, sure. If that means that council should have more autonomy to manage budgets properly, sure. Whatever works, but the mess we're in now...
Ultimately, as long as it's better value for money for the taxpayer.
That's what we want.
Matthew?
For me, I think it's, as you said, bringing in some sort of performance-rated linked system, but also, just want to say, recognising the good. Councils have thousands and thousands of staff who work for them. Yeah. The vast majority of them turn up, do a good day's shift, go home, pick up their phone late in the evening when someone calls them. They do a really, really good job. It is those few people who aren't, or those people who get the high salaries and you go, well, I don't even know who they are, that taints the whole thing. And I think actually there are a lot of directors of services, there are a lot of head of services who do a really good job and you can see that service is improving. The question marks are around those ones who you don't know who they are, you can't get in touch with them, and you don't see the delivery in those
You're right
services.
to flag that, because I'm probably the worst culprit of this, sitting behind a microphone here or elsewhere just going, public sector council workers, 3 days a week.
It's easy to
and all of this.
complain.
And you're right to flag, there are good people there. So
Yeah.
just picking over what you said, it sounds like one of the things you would like to see happen is the flexibility maybe within an organisation, a council, to be able to easily manage out those people who give everyone else a bad name.
Absolutely. I think contract, coming back to that C word, contract, if we could find a way to put the power back in the administration to deal with contracts, that would be the best thing, because there are so many good people in the council who leave because they can't deal with their managers, who can't deal with their managers, and up and up and up we go in the chain of command.
It's been brilliant. Jonathan, thank you. And thank you for finding the time this week to go through this immense bit of work that the TPA does annually, the Town Hall Rich List. People can go online and read more about it for themselves at taxpayersalliance.com. Jonathan, Eida, thank you from the
Thank you,
TPA.
Duncan.
And Councillor Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, thank you for coming
you very
in. We'll
much.
get you back in.
Absolutely.
As long
love
as I
to.
get my free copy of your book, The
I'll
Blueprint.
sign it for you. There
Thank
you go.
you. That's out on July the 4th. And thank you very much for listening to this podcast as well. A couple of things. If you'd like to send us an email about anything you've heard, the email address is podcast@taxpayersalliance.com. Love getting your emails. You find our weekly podcast, A Nation of Taxpayers. You find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. Please follow us and subscribe to us. And if you use Spotify or Apple, please give us a nice 5-star review, because that means the algorithms kick in, and that way other people get to hear this particular podcast. Thank you for listening. I've been your host, Duncan Barkes. Until next time, bye-bye.